am really excited right now to bring on our environmental reporter who will be leaving us in about a week or so. Is Kayla here? Kayla? Hey there.
I am. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh,
Very
God.
bittersweet to be on today.
I know. It's been 2 years. Can you believe it?
It's crazy. It feels like I just started. It's yeah, went by in
Yeah,
a blink of an eye. It feels like.
tell us, I mean, I want to share with the viewers. First of all, when we decided that we were going to do environmental coverage, it was because of some of the things that we were seeing happening in the DMV and just the stories that we'd heard and about, and thought it was time for us to really talk about environmental justice. One, to get the voice of the Black community engaged in this conversation, because a lot of times, we were left out. And when we interviewed you, you articulated that so clearly. You understood. But I'm curious about how you became so interested in the environment.
Yes, I think it started for me as far back as high school. And in high school, not really sure how I got pulled into this, but I got really involved for about a year in efforts to raise awareness and push policy against the mining of certain minerals in really terrible ways that were super exploitative of especially young kids and women in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And as I was sort of getting into that, I started to see more and more connections between the human rights side of things that I had been interested in before and the climate, environment, just interconnections everywhere. And I got really fascinated by this idea that we're all between all humans and the quote unquote more than human world, which is a term I learned recently and thought was really interesting. I got really just fascinated by this concept, and I started to learn more about environmental justice, and that meant a lot to me. So when I went to school, I took a lot of environmental policy courses, and it felt to me like our treatment of the environment and what it means for humans really, really was a problem we could start to tackle in ways that we weren't starting to do at all. And that frustrated me. So that's kind of how I just kept rolling with that. And there's so many incredible stories there too.
Before we go too far, though, I want to know, you said you just learned that phrase, more than human. Tell us what that means.
Well, it just this idea that we seem to think that like we have like the human world and the natural world. But then someone was talking to me and she said like our interaction with the more than human world. And I love that idea because it implies that we are part of that. It is humans and everything else. And in the context I was learning about, it was about planting native plants in urban environments, and the idea that we have all these pests and we're all like angry that there are like there's rats everywhere, but part of the problem is that we have eliminated all of the like structure of the ecosystem, so then it's like nothing is in balance and we just get like all these pests everywhere. And so the idea that we're part of this connected system that we have thrown out of balance is, I think, really, really fascinating.
Yeah, I think even when we talk about just the development that occurs in our urban areas, that's spreading, into sort of the less urban areas, and so you have forests and things that are being eliminated, and so the animals that are housed there, we see, we might see a deer walking up Martin Luther King Avenue. People are seeing foxes and huge turkeys in places that they never saw before, but their habitats have been erased. And so now they're trying to find new places to go, and they're now intermingling with us. Is that sort of, what you've observed as well?
Yes, I think that that is part of it. And also like the fact that we humans see ourselves as like separate, when we're really, really not. And that separation we've tried to create, I think, hurts us just as much as it hurts some idealized idea of nature that we have. We live in the environment. This is where we have made our homes. We can't go anywhere else.
So the past 2 years, you have really had your nose to the ground, the soil, so to speak, covering stories that folks haven't even really thought much about in the DMV. I mean, and we're going to show some of the images that come from some of those stories you've done. But tell us, I mean, I know, you've had to do this because you joined us from a program called Report for America. And I know you've had to give reports on some of the most impactful stories, but share with us what is, what maybe some of those most impactful stories that you feel you've been able to do since you've been here.
Yes, I do also want to give a shout out to Report for America. I think their model and the fact that I was able to be in a position to just cover a beat and stay on it was really, really amazing. I think it's just a very cool concept to be able to join a newsroom I might not otherwise be able to join and cover something that I care a lot about. But in terms of stories, I think have been really impactful. I had the chance while here to do some service journalism, and I felt like that has actually been some of the most impactful work I've gotten to do. So one of those is we did a pretty long guide to solar for homeowners that might be interested and what the different options are and what some of those terms meant. And I felt like that type of work really appealed to me because I got to help people sort through like a really complicated thing that directly impacts them in a way that people often think the environment doesn't directly impact them. And the same is true for a guide to protecting your household from lead and water, which I really, really enjoyed working on. And then additionally in June, when we had those terrible wildfire smoke days, I felt like being able to cover that and consistently explain, like, how can we protect ourselves? What does this mean for us? How is it connected to climate change? And why might we see more of this? Why does this impact environmental justice communities in particular? Being able to be on the ground while we watched this like unprecedented weather event unfold was really impactful as well.
You've done things that, I mean, others have covered, like the situation with people dumping tires in neighborhoods. You covered the park right here, Shepherd Park, and the what is it, the Woods? What's the name of the program? Ward 8 Woods, right? And
Shout out
how
to
they've
them.
been
They
able,
rock.
and it's an amazing job that they've done over there to clean up that park. And then most recently, the story that folks can see in this week's Washington Informer is the story that you did on the neighborhood in Prince George's County with these challenges with these people that were living, that became sort of a dump right in the middle of a community in a block. Talk to us about a couple of those stories.
Yes. So this is one of the stories I'm really excited about. I hope people pick up the paper and take a look or find it on WashingtonInformer.com because this story was almost like a classic example of what you would consider environmental racism in terms of just dumping in a community by a government that owns the land and the things that were being dumped. But the twist a little bit on that is that Capitol Heights, which is where this is happening, has almost all of its officials are Black, and more than 80% of the town is Black, and about 13% today is Latino. And these are the people who are being affected and the people who are making decisions. So it goes a little bit deeper than what we think of as like just, we don't, just white governments placing the same things, but it's still environmental racism, to be clear, because it's all about the structures that have led Capitol Heights to feel they don't have the money or the resources or the information to know that they can't just dump 1,500 used garbage cans in a neighborhood and just leave them. And I started asking questions, and pretty quickly, the government in Capitol Heights was like, oh, so they had been working to clear out these garbage cans. They did not have the equipment and the resources to get them out quickly. But as soon as we started asking questions, the next door neighbor that had contacted us, like, reached out again and was like, oh yeah, within 2 weeks they were gone. So that was
Yes,
like really
yes.
exciting for me to be able to feel like we had a little bit of impact in that case. And people can look out next week for a follow-up story kind of looking at how Capitol Heights has communicated with both us, the informer, but more importantly with the residents that were impacted by this, and see how it wasn't just a problem of the dumping, it was also a problem of a failure of transparency.
Mm. You know,
Um,
you were very dogged in trying to continue that story. You know, ran into a lot of barriers and folks not wanting to talk to you, but you know, you stuck with it, and I think it's been a great story. And I know that there's a follow up that will be coming. As you kind of wrap up, you know, your time with us, what's next for Kayla Benjamin?
what's next? One thing before I even answer that, I just want to take one step back and just talk about one other story that I think we had potentially had a direct impact, which was,
Oh,
if
sure.
anyone remembers, back in November, we covered Kenilworth, a DMV, like, test your car emissions self-service kiosk that was placed in a park. And it, like the storage facility in Capitol Heights, this is somewhere that pretty clearly under the law just should not be there because it's a National Park Service site, only supposed to be for recreation. And neighbors said, hey, this isn't supposed to be there. And the informer said, hey, National Park Service, what's going on with this? And they never opened the site. And I learned about 3 weeks ago that they relatively quickly, for them, have taken it out already. So it's gone, and there is now an emissions test kiosk in Ward 8, which is awesome. And I'm hoping that they will bring one to Ward 7 that is not in a park. Anyway,
Fantastic, Kayla. That's fantastic. Let me ask you, how do you, I mean, do people, do residents, now that they have seen your stories, do they reach out to you? How do you come across these stories? They've been great story ideas, and they've taken a lot of work.
so a lot of my favorite stories have come from residents reaching out to me. So the piece about Capitol Heights, someone read the story about the tires and reached out and said, hey, something similar of a similar type is going on where I am. Like, any interest? And the similar was true for the Kenilworth Park kiosk. I met that woman at a press conference for something else and was just chatting with her, and she said, yeah, there's this weird thing going on in my neighborhood. And just over time, you just start to talk to people, and there's way more stories out there than people even realize. And a lot of them have to do with the public policy choices we are making about the environment that other people live in, which is really not acceptable.
Well, I think you have, I mean, it's been very dynamic. We've certainly appreciated you for having you on our team so that we can make a difference in the communities that we serve. And clearly you've made a difference. So, you know, we really appreciate you for that. And we're going to try to keep that ball rolling as you transition. But have you, I mean, when it comes to environmental justice or environmental racism, or just the whole idea of sustainability, which I will commend you as well for leading our Earth Day issue that took place back in April. You certainly did do a lot to make that a success. But what do you see, or what would you tell residents based upon what you've covered, that, you know, how they should respond if there is something that they're seeing that just doesn't make sense? You won't be with us, but I know, of course, you'd say reach out to the Washington Informer. But some people don't know it when it's happening. Some people just don't see it until
Yes,
there's the effects from it.
yes, and I think that is one of the sort of silent reasons why environmental stories and environmental injustices go so unaddressed for so long, because sometimes you have these really long lag periods. Recently, I was reading a like a academic article about how there are numerous studies showing that if there's an exposure to lead, whether that's in water or paint, like some kind of mass exposure, 20 years later, you can see these pretty stark rises in crime of like, okay, these were kids and now they're grown up and like lead affects people. And well, here we are in 2024. And we had a huge crime wave last year, and DC had an incredibly terrible, worse than Flint, lead and water crisis between 2001 and 2004. And nobody was talking about this. And so I think it is hard to recognize in the moment. What I would tell residents, yes, reach out to the Washington Informer. Also, if there is something that you see day after day, whether it's illegal dumping, whether it's something weird in the ground or the soil, there, just reach out. Just reach out to, whether it's like 311, whether it's the folks at the DC and Office of Energy and Environment are actually really great. Um, and it's worth asking a couple questions, I guess is what I would say. And it's not always anything terrible. Sometimes it's like, oh yes, that looks like that because of something totally benign, but it's worth asking a few questions.
Well, Kayla, thank you. Thank you for being here, for being the response to some of those questions that people have asked, to let people know, no, they're not crazy. It is something wrong. And we're going to help to fix it. We're going to become your partner in resolving some of these environmental justice issues. So again, I asked what's next for Kayla, but we're going to leave that,
Oh,
because that's Kayla's responsibility,
well,
or
what's
your thought. You want to share? Or
I'll say what's next for me is I want to do more on environmental justice. I'm
okay.
really interested in the connection between environment and helping people's daily lives, especially around transit equity, getting around without a car. Um, I know that's like very controversial, but I had to get rid of my car because I couldn't afford it anymore. And my life got way better, which I did not expect at all. Um, and yes, so that's the space I would like to move into, is direct advocacy on environmental justice and the connection between saving our species from our own emissions and like making sure that my grandkids could maybe like go outside sometimes and making people's lives better today and tomorrow. And I think there are a lot of ways where we can do both. That's the space I want to find myself in.
Well, you've
Also,
done a
before I
good
let you go,
job.
I have to
Oh,
say a
go ahead.
huge thank you to the Washington Informer. I had experience here that I would never, ever in a million years been able to have anywhere else. And I feel like the Informer really took a chance on me, and the community really took a chance on me. And I'm immensely, immensely grateful.
So are we. Whew. Thank you.
I know. I'm
Um,
not going to cry,
I know. I know.
and I'm not going to
Uh,
disappear.
Wonderful.
Yes, I'm not going to
Wonderful. Because
disappear.
you are on your journey. You've taken some giant steps on your journey. And of course, we're going to be the wind beneath your wings. We want to see great things happen for you. So you got one more
Thank you
story
so
coming,
much.
right?
Yep. Follow up to the Capitol Heights piece. Take a look.
Wonderful.